Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be comparing interpretivism with positivism. This has been a high requested video because it is a bit of a confusing topic. I'll be going over an overview of both positivism and interpretivism, their epistemologies, their implications on sociological research, as well as critiques. And I'll also be giving you a summary of the main differences at the end, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, so you're basically getting two explain videos in one, so let's get right into it. So first, let's refresh our brains and memories on what epistemology means. Whereas ontology is about the nature of reality. For example, there is only one truth and there is only one reality. Epistemology is all about how we gain and create knowledge. For example, we have to interpret reality in order to create meaning. So with that out of the way, let's get into the epistemology of positivism. So for the epistemology of positivism, positivism says that the world is external, knowledge is gained through traditional scientific methods and observation, and positivism's aim is to predict and get the causes of social phenomena. And our aim is to look at these social phenomena objectively. And for the implications on research has to be objective. You as the researcher have to distance yourself from the subject so that you're not muddying the research and results with your biases. And research is deductive for positivists. This means that you go from having a hypothesis to testing that hypothesis and maybe redoing it and adjusting it if need be from your results. And quantitative methods are favored because these bring the most objective and generalizable results, because that's what you want in order to predict the causes and the consequences of social phenomena. So these quantitative methods can include things like quantitative surveys, structured interviews, maybe not even interviews. You want surveys that are literally like yes or no, or things that you can tally up so that you get a large representative sample. And of course, there are some critiques. So as we know, our reality isn't just out there. We create worlds, we create meanings in our heads about what we think and what we think people perceive about us. So here are some critiques of positivism. Objectivity is impossible, and is it also desirable? Because at the end of the day, we're humans and we have biases. Our experiences and our environments influence us. So to ignore that and to kid ourselves that we're trying to be objective, is that harmful to research? And also, positivism can be said to be reductive. We're not looking at lived experiences, we're not looking at real world examples, we're just looking at things at face value. And actually, it can be argued that we are projecting our own meanings onto it through our existing hypothesis that we have made up in our heads, whether that is, from research or something that we have observed, as positivists would prefer. And lastly, also, is science correct by default? As we know, positivists prefer scientific methods and things like that. But technically, science is just another theory. It's just another paradigm which reinforces its own meanings by its own concepts, theories, and methods. So, of course, when we're talking about science, we're also referring to Western science. That is what we're actually referring to. So that's also being reinforced when we talk about positivism. So let's talk about interpretivism now. So as you will probably have gathered, interpretivism is the opposite of positivism. The epistemology of interpretivism is interpretivism. I'm going to trip over that word a lot. Is that the world and reality is a social construct. Everything is kind of in our heads almost, if you go to the extreme side of phenomenology and ethnomethodology, which I cover in this video on action theories. So methods of natural sciences, biophysics, chemistry, all those traditional scientific methods can't really apply because reality is not just observable. Reality is formed in the meanings, the interactions, which cannot really be quantified. Sociology deals with the social, but scientific deals with the observable, and the social is not always observable. So how can we use scientific methods? And of course, there are more factors than just the observable, like we said. Histories and cultural meanings are also attached. So if we're purely talking about this from a Western scientific perspective, then we're going to miss out on all that rich cultural context if we're looking at other cultures. And interpretivism's aim is to understand specific context and the environment. So you cannot be objective as interpreters say, because we are embedded in our own social realities and social environments. So obviously that is going to be explicit. That is going to be that's going to be embedded in our research. So it's actually helpful for us to acknowledge that bias if you look at it from an interpretivist standpoint. So the implications for research for this is that you have to be reflexive. If you're going to study sociology, if you're studying sociology already, you're going to probably get brownie points if you are reflexive about your experiences and your biases in your research. This is reflecting on how your experiences and your environments may have affected your research and your questioning and maybe your formation of question in the first place. And this tells your markers that you are, aware of this and not just going into it with blinders and just thinking that, okay, this is going to be right, this is completely objective. And this is not to say that sociology teachers and lecturers are inherently interpretivist, but it's just how the marking system kind of works. You might want to clarify this with your individual lecture, but generally my advice is to be reflective in your work. And another implication is that research is inductive. So rather than going out into the field with a pre-assumed theory, you want to go and observe, you want to go and look at the context, find out the interactions between people, between your research subjects, and then kind of do a broad to narrow approach, so that you're not putting your own biases on the research, but rather you're letting the research dictate your result, if that makes sense. And of course, this means that you as the researcher and the subject are interacting with each other and you're creating this research together almost. And of course, this means that you cannot generalize the data, and nor is that desirable in an interpretivist approach. Generally, you're going to be using more qualitative methods such as surveys, but more long answer surveys, unstructured interviews, focus groups, maybe even some observation. Let's move on to some critiques of interpretivism now. So of course, the first thing is that it risks bias. By being explicit about the bias, are you running the risk of kind of polarizing research? Because suddenly everything's about your own opinion and your own lived experience, and while that is maybe good and desirable in some aspects, for some aspects such as policy, you're going to want to be as objective as possible, because you're going to be reaching a lot of people. And following from this is another critique, is that it's very difficult to get representative data because you're only focusing on such small samples, because your methods of research are so micro and they're not really scalable, as opposed to surveys that you can send out to loads of people who just do multiple choice. So when you're producing theory or policy, using interpretivist methods and viewpoints might not be very helpful. And thirdly, variables aren't controlled when you do interpretivist research, because when you do objective or more positivist research, you're trying to isolate factors so that you can really control and find out what is the root cause. So by using interpretivist methods, it's kind of impossible to figure out what the real root cause is when you're just going into the world and there are loads of different factors, like we said, historical, cultural, individual, interactions that are influencing what you're researching. So to summarize, here are the main differences between positivism and interpretivism. Feel free to screenshot this table that is on the screen now, over here. So firstly, positivism aims to predict, whereas interpretivism aims to understand. Whereas in positivism focuses on the generalization and seeking patterns, interpretivism focuses on how the context shaped the subject. Positivism is deductive and interpretivism is inductive in the research. Positivism says that there is one single observable reality, whereas interpretivism says that there are multiple unobservable, sometimes, realities. And positivism says that the researcher must remain objective and unbiased, whereas interpretivism says that objectivity isn't desirable and personal influence is inevitable and therefore should be acknowledged. Positivism uses mainly quantitative methods and interpretivism uses qualitative methods. And lastly, positivism aims to increase generalizability using larger samples, whereas smaller samples can be analyzed in greater detail and depth with interpretivist methods. So I hope this was interesting and helpful with your understanding of positivism and interpretivism. I don't know how many more times I can say those two words, but which viewpoint do you prefer more to use in your studies and your research? Let me know in the comments below. And with all that said, I will see you in my next video. Bye.